Welcome to the debate. Today we are looking at a shift that has, well, it's completely rewritten the script on how we travel, how we work, and most contentiously, how we live. We're talking about short-term rentals.
Or as a lot of locals have started calling them, ghost hotels.
That's a provocative start, but let's strip back the labels for a second. We're talking about furnished, self-contained apartments or houses that are rented for, brief periods, days or weeks, mostly through platforms like Airbnb or VRBO. This isn't just about a spare bedroom anymore. This is an industry that took the sort of stiff, expensive world of corporate housing and democratized it. It opened up the world to private owners and gave travelers something the hotel industry simply couldn't: a home.
But that's the crux of the problem, isn't it? It gave travelers a home by taking that exact home away from a resident. We aren't wrestling with a simple travel innovation here. We are wrestling with a fundamental clash between the right to maximize profit from a property and the right of a community to actually exist as a community.
I think that framing is it's far too binary. You're painting this as a zero-sum game where every Airbnb is a stolen home, and I just don't see it that way. I mean, look at the utility here. Short-term rentals fill a massive gap in the accommodation market. If you are, say, a family of 5 trying to visit a city for a week, or you're a professional relocating for a month-long project, what are your options? 2 or 3 hotel rooms? That's financially ruinous.
It's expensive, sure.
It's not just expensive, it's completely impractical. You don't have a kitchen, you don't have a washer or dryer, you're living out of a suitcase in a 300-square-foot box. Short-term rentals offer amenities that actually allow for living, not just sleeping. And they do it at a price point that is often, 25 to 50% cheaper than a hotel for those month-long stays. That efficiency matters. It unlocks travel and mobility for millions of people who otherwise couldn't afford it.
Okay, but let's look at why it's 25 to 50% cheaper. It's not magic. It's because the short-term rental model strips away all the overhead that makes a hotel a hotel. There's no front desk staff, no security, no commercial zoning taxes, and often no compliance with the strict safety codes that hotels have to follow. That efficiency you're praising is actually just regulatory arbitrage. You're comparing a regulated commercial industry to an unregulated gig economy free-for-all and calling the latter innovative just because it's cheaper.
It's cheaper because it utilizes existing assets more effectively. It connects supply and demand directly, cutting out the middleman. That is the definition of market efficiency.
It's an incentive to displace. That is the reality we have to confront. When a landlord looks at their spreadsheet and realizes they can make, say, 30% more profit renting to tourists on a short-term basis than they can renting to a local family on a yearly lease, what do you think happens? That is a massive financial wedge. It turns housing from a social good into a purely speculative asset.
But landlords have always sought to maximize returns. That isn't new.
The scale is new, and the aggression is new. We are seeing cases where landlords actively pressure and coerce long-term tenants out of their units, particularly vulnerable low-income residents, just so they can flip the unit onto the short-term market. They are emptying out entire neighborhoods to chase that yield premium. That isn't filling a gap in the market. That is cannibalizing the long-term housing stock.
I want to push back on this cannibalization narrative because it's emotionally potent, but I think it often lacks nuance. You're blaming STRs for a housing crisis that has roots in decades of poor zoning and lack of construction. I mean, take the Australian rental crisis of 2022. Critics immediately pointed fingers at short-term rentals as the villain. But if you actually look at the timeline, short-term rental listings diminished during the COVID pandemic. The crisis persisted and even worsened when the STRs were empty or delisted.
You're cherry-picking the pandemic anomaly, though. Of course, listings dropped when global travel basically illegalized itself. But look at what happened in Tasmania specifically. We have clear data showing that a significant majority of properties listed as short-term rentals had previously been long-term leases. That is a direct transfer. You can't argue with the physics of it. If a house is occupied by a tourist for 200 days a year, it cannot house a family. In supply-constrained markets, every single STR is a subtractive event for the local workforce.
But is it the primary driver of the shortage? Most economists point to interest rates, construction costs, and migration patterns.
Blaming a person renting out their investment property is kind of a convenient scapegoat for failed government housing policy. And again, you are ignoring the user. If we ban these rentals to save the housing stock, where does the traveling nurse stay? Where's the family renovating their own home stay for a month?
They stay in hotels or extended stay motels or, legally zoned bed and breakfasts. The industry existed before Airbnb.
Not at this price point, and not with this kind of flexibility. You can't just wave away the economic benefits for the traveler. For a relocation, having a soft landing in a furnished apartment with a kitchen is the difference between a nightmare move and a manageable one. It democratizes that corporate housing experience that used to be reserved just for executives. Now a grad student can access it.
But at what cost to the neighbor? You keep focusing on the person staying in the unit, but I want to talk about the person living next door. This brings us to the gray market of safety and regulation. When I check into a Marriott, I know the fire sprinklers work. I know the hallways are ADA compliant. I know there is security if someone starts screaming at 3 a.m.
And you pay a premium for that assurance.
I pay for safety. In the short-term rental market, that assurance it's not existent. We are talking about residential units being used as commercial hotels without any of the commercial safeguards. The safety check on these platforms is often just a photo verification. You have guests staying in units that might violate fire codes, lack proper egress, or have dangerous electrical work. And the platform's advice is basically contact the host and ask. That is a massive regression in consumer protection.
I think you're underestimating the power of the platform's own self-policing mechanisms. Reviews, superhost status, identity verification. These are powerful incentives. A host who provides an unsafe or dirty environment gets review bumped and loses business immediately. The market regulates quality faster than a municipal inspector ever could. Plus, the industry is professionalizing. We see standard practices now like holding deposits, credit checks, professional cleaning fees. This isn't just people throwing a mattress on the floor anymore.
The market regulates quality, perhaps, but it doesn't regulate legality. You mentioned professionalizing, but I'd argue it's evading. Look at the tax situation. Hotels pay transient occupancy taxes, funds that go to local infrastructure, schools, emergency services. Short-term rentals frequently operate in the dark, evading these taxes entirely while their guests still use the roads, the police, and the parks. It's a free rider problem. They want the benefits of a hotel business with the responsibilities of a private resident.
That is changing rapidly, though. Most major platforms now collect and remit these taxes automatically in thousands of jurisdictions. The Wild West era is ending. And regarding regulation, look at what London did. As of 2019, they introduced a 90-day cap. You can rent your place out, but only for 90 days a year.
Which proves my point.
No, it proves my point. It proves that we can find a middle ground. The London model allows the homeowner to make some extra income and provides flexibility for travelers during peak seasons, but it prevents the property from becoming a full-time commercial hotel. It preserves the residential character without destroying the innovation. That is a policy success, not a failure of the model.
It's a policy that's desperate to catch up with a runaway train. And let's be honest, that 90-day cap in London is incredibly difficult to enforce without massive resources. But let's step away from the high-level policy and talk about the actual experience of living next to one of these innovations. You mentioned earlier that nuisance is subjective. I strongly disagree.
How so? One neighbor's nuisance is another neighbor's vibrant community.
There is nothing vibrant about a bachelor party arriving at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday in a quiet cul-de-sac. The core issue is that the temporary resident has zero stake in the community. They don't care if they park across your driveway. They don't care if they leave trash bins overflowing. They are there to consume the location, not to contribute to it.
But bad neighbors exist everywhere. Come on. I've had long-term neighbors who played drums at midnight and never mowed their lawn. You can't attribute standard human friction exclusively to short-term renters.
The difference is frequency and recourse. If your long-term neighbor plays drums at midnight, you can talk to them. You might have a relationship. You can call the landlord. With an STR, the neighbor changes every 3 days. You are in a permanent state of negotiation with strangers. Look at Santa Cruz, California. The situation got so bad that local supervisors had to discuss implementing specific parking restrictions in neighborhoods with high STR density.
I know the Santa Cruz example well, but look at what actually happened. They used policy to solve a friction point. They prioritized local parking permits. That is how local government works. It identifies a conflict, in this case, parking scarcity, and it legislates a solution. It doesn't mean the STR concept is invalid, it just means it needs guardrails.
But the fact that you need to legislate who can park on a residential street specifically because of tourists suggests that the use case is invasive. You are retrofitting a neighborhood to survive a commercial invasion. And for what? So a landlord can make that 30% premium?
No, so that a family can afford a vacation. So that a digital nomad can spend a month contributing to the local economy. You keep framing this as landlord versus neighbor, but you're erasing the guest. These guests spend money at local coffee shops, restaurants, and grocery stores, often in neighborhoods that don't get traditional hotel foot traffic. There is an economic multiplier effect that goes directly into the community.
That multiplier effect is a myth when you factor in displacement. A local resident spends money in that coffee shop 365 days a year. A tourist is there for 3 days. If you displace the local to make room for the tourist, you are hollowing out the consistent economic base of the neighborhood. You end up with these Venice effects, cities that are basically theme parks by day and ghost towns by night because nobody actually lives there anymore.
That is such an extreme comparison. Most STRs are not in Venice. They are in suburbs or rural areas or secondary cities where hotel coverage is terrible. In those places, STRs are a lifeline. They bring tourism dollars to places Hilton and Marriott completely ignore. And for the property owner, who might be a retiree trying to pay their rising property taxes, that income is the difference between keeping their home and selling it.
Or more often, it's an investment firm buying up 5 single-family homes in a starter neighborhood to create a diversified portfolio of rental assets. The grandma renting her spare room image is the marketing brochure. The reality is industrialized, decentralized hospitality. And unlike the hotel industry, which employs staff with benefits, protections, and oversight, the STR industry relies on a gig economy underclass.
Underclass is a bit dramatic.
Is it? Who cleans these units? It's not unionized hotel staff. It's often under-the-table cleaners paid per turnover, with 0 job security, 0 health benefits, and 0 workers' comp if they slip on a wet floor. We are replacing good service jobs with precarious gig work, all to shave $20 off the nightly rate for a tourist.
It's flexible work. Many people prefer the ability to pick up cleaning gigs on their own schedule rather than clocking into a 9-to-5 hotel shift. And the market creates businesses. There are entire small companies now dedicated to STR management and cleaning. That's entrepreneurship.
It's the erosion of labor standards masquerading as flexibility, just like the erosion of zoning standards is masquerading as housing innovation.
Okay, we are going in circles on the morality of the market here, so let's try to land this plane. I look at short-term rentals and I see an inevitable evolution. The technology exists to connect people with spaces. The demand for flexible, amenity-rich living, whether for a week or a month, is exploding. We cannot stuff that genie back in the bottle. The value proposition is just too high. 50% cheaper, full kitchens, pet-friendly, these are things people really need.
And I look at it and see a failure to protect the primary function of housing, shelter for residents. When you prioritize the transient over the permanent, you break the social contract of the neighborhood. The evidence, from the displacement mechanics to the safety violations to the simple loss of community cohesion, suggests that the price we pay for this flexibility is our own stability.
But don't we value the freedom to do what we want with our property?
Not when your freedom destroys my ability to live next to you in peace.
It seems the tension really comes down to this. Do we build our cities and suburbs to be stable fortresses for those who are already there? Or do we build them as flexible networks for a mobile world?
A mobile world is fine as long as you have a home to come back to. My fear is that in this new model, home becomes just another booking.
A sobering thought to end on. We've laid out the economics, the ethics, and the community impact. Now it's up to you to look at your own neighborhood and decide which version of the future you want to see.
Or perhaps which version you can afford to live in.
Thanks for listening to The Debate.